What happens when a racist manager targets the wrong black woman, assuming his actions will go unnoticed and unchallenged? This is the incredible story of determination and justice, where humiliation turns into a bold act of empowerment. From being thrown out of a luxury store to returning as its new owner, watch as prejudice is shattered and a toxic legacy is replaced with hope. You won't believe how it all unfolds. Brianna Coleman stepped through the glass doors, the faint chime announcing her arrival. She paused for a moment, taking in the store's grandeur with a small smile. Dressed in a simple blouse and tailored slacks, she was unassuming yet composed, her warm brown skin glowing under the soft lighting. She had a purpose here, finding the perfect anniversary gift for her oldest friend. From behind the counter, Stephen Lang immediately noticed her. His sharp gaze flickered over her appearance, lingering on her handbag and the slight scuff on her flats. To him, she didn't belong. The faint sneer that tugged at his lips was quickly masked by a professional veneer. Stephen's eyes tracked her movements as she walked toward the jewelry section. She moved with a quiet confidence, her fingers lightly brushing the edges of the glass display as she admired the shimmering necklaces inside. But Stephen wasn't seeing confidence. He was seeing trouble. He stepped away from the counter, adjusting his tie as he made his way toward her. "Keep an eye on the woman near the necklaces," he murmured to a younger clerk, who nodded nervously. Stephen approached slowly, feigning casual interest, though his every movement was calculated. Brianna didn't notice him at first, engrossed in the intricate detailing of a diamond pendant. But the moment Stephen cleared his throat, she looked up, her expression polite but guarded. "Good afternoon," Stephen said, his tone laced with forced politeness. "Is there something I can assist you with?" Brianna smiled. "Just browsing, thank you." Stephen's eyes narrowed slightly. "Some of these pieces are very delicate," he remarked. Brianna's brow furrowed at his odd comment, but she chose not to respond. She turned back to the display, but Stephen lingered, his presence an unspoken accusation. The tension in the room grew almost palpable as the scene quietly unfolded, unnoticed by most of the other customers. Only the younger clerk glanced their way, a flicker of unease crossing his face. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably as Brianna tried to ignore Stephen's looming presence. She leaned closer to the glass case, admiring a diamond pendant, hoping he would lose interest and move on. But he didn't. Stephen cleared his throat again, his voice cutting through the quiet. "You know, this particular piece is one of our most exclusive. It's not something we usually let customers handle without special arrangements." Brianna glanced up, catching the faint smirk that tugged at the corners of his mouth. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she straightened her posture. "I wasn't planning on touching it. I'm just browsing." Stephen tilted his head, his eyes scanning her once more. "Of course, ma'am. Just thought I'd mention it. We've had incidents before, you see. It's my job to ensure everything stays in order." The insinuation hit Brianna like a slap. Her calm demeanor faltered for a split second before she steadied herself. "I'm sure you do your job very thoroughly," she replied, her tone cool. Stephen's smirk widened. "I try my best." Brianna turned her back to him, forcing herself to focus on the jewelry instead of the heat rising in her chest. She was no stranger to situations like this, being followed, questioned, subtly undermined, but it never got easier. Stephen didn't let up. He stepped closer, his voice dropping just slightly. "If there's something specific you're looking for, I can show you pieces within a more accessible range." Brianna froze. Slowly, she turned to face him, her gaze sharp. "Accessible?" Stephen feigned surprise at her reaction. "You know, something more suited to what exactly?" Brianna cut him off, her voice steady but laced with steel. Stephen's mask of politeness slipped for a moment, his expression hardening. "I'm simply trying to assist you, ma'am. There's no need to get defensive." The exchange had started to draw quiet attention. A few customers glanced over, sensing the tension but pretending not to notice. At the counter, Daniel, the younger clerk, shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between Stephen and Brianna. Brianna folded her arms, her posture unyielding. "I came here to shop, not to be interrogated. If this is your idea of assistance, I'd rather not have it." Stephen straightened, his expression cooling into one of smug authority. "I'm responsible for this store's integrity, ma'am. I have every right to ensure our merchandise is protected." "Protected from what? A paying customer?" Brianna shot back, her voice rising slightly. Stephen didn't respond immediately, the silence thick with unspoken prejudice. The moment stretched, and Brianna knew she was being judged for more than just her shopping habits. A woman near the perfume counter whispered something to her companion, and Daniel took a hesitant step forward, as if debating whether to intervene. "Perhaps it would be best if I asked someone else for help," Brianna said finally, her tone biting. "Clearly, you have no intention of actually assisting me." Stephen's smirk returned, colder this time. "You're free to leave at any time, ma'am." Brianna's chest tightened. The humiliation simmered beneath her skin, threatening to boil over. She wanted to leave, to walk out, and never come back. But she also wanted to stand her ground. Forcing herself to stay calm, she squared her shoulders. "I think I'll continue browsing, thank you. You can go back to doing whatever it is you do." Stephen's jaw tightened at the dismissal, but he didn't move. Instead, he crossed his arms, planting himself firmly a few feet away, his eyes following Brianna's every move. As she moved to another display, she could feel his gaze boring into her back. The tension was unbearable, each step a reminder of the unspoken accusation hanging in the air. Daniel, still hovering near the counter, finally mustered the courage to speak. Sir, I can take over here if you'd like. There's a customer asking about the watches." Stephen glanced at him, his expression unreadable. "I'll handle this," he said firmly, dismissing Daniel with a wave. Daniel hesitated, then retreated, casting a sympathetic glance at Brianna before disappearing into another section of the store. Brianna forced herself to keep moving, her chin held high, but inside, her frustration was mounting. She could feel the other customers' eyes on her, the weight of their judgment, or worse, their apathy, adding to her humiliation. Stephen trailed her like a shadow, his presence suffocating. Each time she paused to look at an item, he was there, watching, waiting, as though daring her to make a wrong move. Finally, unable to take it any longer, Brianna turned to face him fully. "Is this how you treat all your customers, or is it just me?" Stephen's expression remained impassive, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, at having gotten under her skin. "I treat everyone according to store policy, ma'am." Brianna took a step closer, her voice low but firm. "Then maybe your store policy needs an overhaul." Their eyes locked, the air between them charged with tension. Neither of them noticed the growing number of customers watching from the corners of the store, their curiosity piqued by the escalating confrontation. The battle lines were drawn, and neither Brianna nor Stephen showed any signs of backing down. Brianna's question hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "Is this how you treat all your customers, or is it just me?" Stephen Lang didn't flinch. Instead, he crossed his arms and straightened his posture, a smug smile curling at the corners of his mouth. "As I said, ma'am, I follow store policy. If you're feeling uncomfortable, perhaps you should ask yourself why." A murmur rippled through the store, subtle but noticeable. Customers who had been browsing turned their attention toward the confrontation, their gazes flickering between Brianna and Stephen. Some tried to appear as though they weren't watching, but their curiosity betrayed them. Brianna felt the weight of every set of eyes on her, and it fueled the fire building in her chest. "Why?" she repeated, her voice firm. "I'll tell you why. You've followed me from the moment I walked in. You've questioned me, harassed me, and made it clear you don't want me here. And now, you're trying to make me the problem." Stephen's expression didn't waver. Instead, he shrugged, feigning indifference. "Ma'am, I'm simply doing my job. If you've misinterpreted that, it's not my fault." Brianna clenched her fists, her nails pressing into her palms. "Your job? Is it part of your job to assume I'm a thief because I don't look like your usual customers? To treat me like I'm guilty of something just for existing in your store? Don't twist my words, Stephen snapped, the polished mask of professionalism slipping for a moment. I don't have to twist anything, Brianna retorted, taking a step closer. Your actions speak louder than anything you could say. Stephen's jaw tightened as the murmurs in the store grew louder. A few customers looked visibly uncomfortable, casting nervous glances at one another. At the counter, Daniel shifted uneasily, his hands fidgeting with a stack of receipts. Brianna pressed on, her voice steady despite the fire burning in her chest. Let me make one thing clear. I have every right to be here. And if you're going to continue treating me like I don't, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong. Stephen laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. If you can't afford anything here, ma'am, you're wasting everyone's time. The words hit Brianna like a slap, her composure faltering for just a moment. Around her, she could hear the faint gasps of other customers, but no one stepped forward to intervene. That's enough, a woman's voice called out. Both Brianna and Stephen turned toward the sound. Near the perfume counter, a middle-aged woman with a designer handbag glared at Stephen, her lips pressed into a thin line. I've been shopping here for years, and I've never seen anything like this. The way you're treating her is disgusting. Stephen's confidence flickered, but he quickly recovered, his tone icy. Ma'am, this doesn't concern you. It does when I have to watch a customer being harassed for no reason, the woman shot back. She turned to Brianna, offering a tight smile. You don't deserve this, and he has no right to treat you this way. For the first time, Stephen seemed genuinely uncomfortable. His eyes darted around the store, noting the growing audience. A few more customers murmured in agreement, though none stepped forward as boldly as the woman. Brianna nodded her thanks to the woman, but didn't back down from Stephen. She could feel her anger bubbling over, but she refused to let him see her crack. What now, Stephen? She asked, her tone cutting. Going to call security because you've embarrassed yourself? Stephen's eyes narrowed. If you don't lower your voice and stop disrupting the store, I just might. At the entrance, a security guard lingered, watching the scene unfold. Stephen gestured toward him, waving him over. The guard hesitated, his expression uncertain as he approached. Is there a problem here? The guard asked, glancing between Brianna and Stephen. No problem, Stephen said smoothly, his voice regaining its usual smug tone. This customer is causing a disturbance and refusing to cooperate. Brianna stepped forward, her voice steady. The only disturbance here is him. He's been harassing me since I walked in, accusing me of things he has no reason to believe. The guard frowned, looking between them. His hesitation was evident, but Stephen pressed on. She's refused to leave after repeated warnings, Stephen said firmly. We have a right to remove her if she doesn't comply. I'm not going anywhere, Brianna said, her voice ringing out clearly. I have every right to be here, and I'm not leaving because you can't handle being called out for your behavior. The tension in the store was almost unbearable now, the air thick with unspoken judgments and simmering unease. The guard glanced around, clearly unsure of how to proceed. Perhaps we can resolve this calmly, the guard offered weakly, his tone uncertain. Brianna held her ground, her gaze locked on Stephen. I'm not leaving, not until this stops. Stephen's face darkened, his composure slipping further. Around them, the murmurs of the crowd grew louder, and Brianna could feel the tide slowly turning. She wasn't alone anymore, and she wasn't about to back down. The murmurs grew louder, swelling to a low hum that filled the store. Customers exchanged glances, unsure of whether to step in or keep their distance. Brianna stood tall, her eyes locked on Stephen's, her body language radiating defiance. Stephen's smugness began to crack, though he tried to hide it. He adjusted his tie and turned toward the security guard, his voice cold and clipped. Do your job and escort her out. She's clearly not here to shop. The guard hesitated, his brow furrowing as he looked at Brianna. Ma'am, is there a reason you're refusing to leave? Yes, Brianna replied, her voice unwavering. I came here to shop. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not leaving just because he's decided I don't belong. Her words cut through the noise, silencing the whispers. The security guard glanced back at Stephen, then at the customers who were still pretending to browse while intently watching the scene. "Ma'am, if there's been a misunderstanding, maybe we can—" the guard began, but Stephen cut him off. "There's no misunderstanding," Stephen snapped. "She's creating a disturbance, and I have the right to ask her to leave." Brianna stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "A disturbance? You mean I disturbed your assumption that I don't have the right to be here?" The security guard opened his mouth to respond, but hesitated, clearly caught in the middle. "You don't belong here," Stephen said, his voice rising. "I've been patient, but I won't tolerate this any longer. And I won't tolerate being treated like a criminal for daring to exist in your store." Brianna fired back. Her voice carried through the store, her frustration and anger spilling over. "You've followed me, harassed me, humiliated me, and for what? Because I don't look like your usual customer?" Stephen's face flushed, his composure slipping as the room seemed to close in around him. "If you don't leave now, I'll call the police," he threatened, his voice shaking slightly. Brianna didn't flinch. Instead, she took another step forward, her tone sharp and cutting. "Go ahead. Call them. Let's see how well that works out for you when they find out you're kicking out a paying customer for no reason." The room fell into a tense silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Stephen glanced around, his confidence faltering as he saw the other customers' expressions. Some looked outraged. Others were visibly uncomfortable. At the counter, Daniel finally stepped forward, his voice shaky but resolute. "Sir, maybe we should just stay out of this," Stephen barked, turning on the younger man. "No," Daniel said, his voice gaining strength. "She's right. She hasn't done anything wrong. And this isn't okay." Stephen's glare could have cut through steel. "You work for me, Daniel. Remember that." Daniel hesitated, but didn't back down. "I work for the store, and this isn't how we're supposed to treat people." Brianna gave Daniel a small, grateful nod, but kept her attention on Stephen. "Looks like I'm not the only one who thinks you're out of line." Stephen's lips pressed into a thin line as his gaze darted between Brianna, Daniel, and the customers who were now openly staring. The balance of power had shifted, and he knew it. The security guard stepped between them, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "All right, everyone, let's calm down," he said. He turned to Brianna, his tone softer. "Ma'am, if you'd like to make a purchase, I can assist you personally." Stephen's head snapped toward the guard, his face a mask of disbelief. "You can't be serious. She's done nothing wrong," the guard interrupted, his tone firm. "And if she's here to shop, that's her right." Brianna's gaze didn't waver as she spoke. "I appreciate that, but I don't need your help. I came here expecting to be treated like any other customer." Clearly, that was too much to ask. Stephen took a step closer, his voice low and venomous. "You're trying to make a scene. That's all this is." Brianna met his glare with unwavering confidence. "The only scene here is the one you created, and I'm not going anywhere." The tension in the store was palpable, the weight of the confrontation pressing down on everyone present. Stephen opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time, he seemed to realize that he had lost control of the situation. "I'll be browsing," Brianna said, her tone calm and deliberate. "Feel free to follow me if you think I'm such a threat. I'm sure everyone here would love to watch you embarrass yourself even more." With that, she turned and walked toward another display, her head held high. The customers parted to let her pass, their silence speaking volumes. Stephen stood frozen for a moment, his face a mix of fury and humiliation. Daniel glanced at him, then back at Brianna, before returning to the counter, his expression conflicted. The security guard remained where he was, watching Stephen carefully, as if anticipating his next move. And Brianna? She continued browsing, determined to reclaim her dignity, no matter how much Stephen tried to strip it away. Stephen stood rooted in place, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. His anger simmered, barely contained beneath a thin veneer of control. He could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, each customer silently judging him. Brianna's composure only made his fury grow. She shouldn't be winning. He turned sharply toward the security guard, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "You're dismissed," he snapped. The guard frowned, taken aback. "Excuse me? You heard me," Stephen hissed, his tone low and venomous. "Leave! Now! I don't need someone undermining me in my own store." The guard glanced around, clearly uncomfortable. "Sir, I'm just trying to de-escalate the situation." "This isn't necessary." "Don't tell me what's necessary," Stephen barked. His voice rose, drawing more attention. "You're here to follow my instructions. If you can't do that, you're done. Get out of my store." The security guard hesitated, then shook his head in disbelief. "Fine," he muttered. "Good luck dealing with this on your own." He turned and walked toward the exit, casting a final glance at Stephen before stepping outside. Stephen's chest heaved with barely restrained fury. He turned his glare on Daniel, who was still lingering nervously near the counter. "And you," he snapped. Daniel froze, his eyes widening. "You're fired," Stephen said, jabbing a finger in his direction. "What?" Daniel stammered, his voice trembling. "But I don't need someone questioning my authority in front of customers," Stephen interrupted. "Pack up your things and leave." "Now!" Daniel's face flushed red, a mix of shock and anger washing over him. For a moment, it looked like he might argue, but then he shook his head and muttered, "You're making a mistake. Get out," Stephen growled. Daniel grabbed his belongings from behind the counter, shooting a sympathetic glance at Brianna before walking toward the exit. The door closed behind him with a faint chime, leaving Stephen alone to face the growing unease of the remaining customers. Brianna watched the scene unfold, her expression a mask of calm despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. "So, this is how you handle things?" she said, her tone even. "Fire everyone who doesn't blindly follow your lead?" Stephen whirled on her, his face contorted with rage. "You don't get to lecture me," he spat. "You're the one causing this chaos." "I think everyone here can see who's really causing the chaos," Brianna said, gesturing subtly to the customers, who quickly looked away but didn't leave. Stephen's hands clenched into fists. He was losing control, and he knew it. His pride, his authority, everything was slipping through his fingers. "You think you're so clever," he sneered, "but I've had enough of this. You want to make this a legal matter? Fine." He pulled his phone from his pocket and began dialing. Brianna raised an eyebrow. "Calling the police? Over what? A woman shopping in your store?" Stephen ignored her, his fingers trembling as he pressed the numbers. He brought the phone to his ear, his expression dark and resolute. The customers shifted uncomfortably, a few of them edging toward the door. Brianna stood her ground, her posture unyielding as she watched him with a mix of incredulity and quiet defiance. "Hello," Stephen said into the phone, his voice steady but seething. "This is Stephen Lang, manager at Regal Lux. I need police assistance immediately. There's a customer here refusing to leave and causing a disturbance." He paused, his eyes locking with Brianna's. "Yes, she's been aggressive and disruptive, and I believe she may be a threat to the safety of our merchandise." Brianna let out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" Stephen didn't respond, his focus on the call. "Yes, I'll stay on the line until they arrive," he said, his voice dripping with smug satisfaction. He hung up and slipped the phone back into his pocket, crossing his arms as he glared at Brianna. "We'll see how confident you are when the police get here." Brianna's expression didn't waver. She took a step closer, her voice calm but commanding. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Stephen smirked, his confidence returning. "We'll see about that." The tension in the room was suffocating now. The remaining customers exchanged uneasy glances, and a few began quietly making their way toward the exit, not wanting to be caught in whatever was about to unfold. But Brianna didn't move. She stood tall, her gaze steady, and waited. The tension in the store grew heavier as the glass doors swung open and two uniformed police officers walked in. Their arrival drew all eyes, the murmurs from lingering customers fading into silence. Stephen stepped forward, straightening his posture, his smugness returning like armor. "Officers," Stephen began, his voice smooth and authoritative, "thank you for coming so quickly. This woman has been causing a disturbance, refusing to leave after multiple requests." Brianna, still standing near the jewelry display, met their gaze steadily. Her voice was calm but firm. What he's saying isn't true. I came here to shop, and he's been harassing me from the moment I walked in. Now he's trying to force me out because I dared to stand up to him." The officers exchanged a glance, their expressions neutral but assessing. One stepped forward, addressing Stephen. "Sir, can you explain what happened in more detail?" Stephen smirked, gesturing toward Brianna. "I already told you. She's creating a scene, arguing with staff, and refusing to leave. This is private property, and I've made it clear she's no longer welcome." The officer turned to Brianna. "Ma'am, is this true? Have you been asked to leave?" "I have," Brianna admitted, her tone steady. "But only because he doesn't like the way I look or the fact that I called him out for profiling me." Stephen scoffed, his laugh cold and dismissive. "Profiling? That's absurd. She's making baseless accusations because she doesn't want to take responsibility for her behavior." The officer raised a hand to quiet them both, his tone remaining professional. "Ma'am, I understand your frustration, but if the manager has asked you to leave, he's within his rights to do so. This is private property, and he has the authority to enforce store policies." Brianna clenched her jaw, her hands tightening into fists at her sides. She looked around the room, seeing the other customers watching quietly, none of them daring to intervene. The weight of their silence was crushing. "This is exactly why this kind of behavior continues," Brianna said, her voice sharp. "Because no one holds people like him accountable." The second officer spoke up, his tone softer. "Ma'am, if you feel you've been treated unfairly, you can file a formal complaint. But for now, we need to de-escalate the situation. Please leave the premises, and you can take further action afterward." Brianna took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay composed despite the humiliation rising in her chest. "Fine," she said finally, her voice steady but cold. "I'll leave. But this isn't over." The officers nodded, stepping aside to allow her to pass. As she moved toward the door, she paused and turned back to Stephen, her eyes locking with his. "You've made a mistake," she said, her tone low and unyielding. "A big one," Stephen chuckled, shaking his head. "We'll see about that." Without another word, Brianna exited the store, the soft chime of the glass door closing behind her echoing in the uneasy silence. The officers lingered briefly, exchanging a few words with Stephen. "If there are any further issues, don't hesitate to call us again," one of them said before they left. As the officers departed, Stephen turned to the remaining customers with an air of triumph. "The matter has been resolved," he announced. "Feel free to continue shopping." Most of the customers avoided his gaze, their discomfort palpable as they slowly resumed browsing. Stephen ignored their unease, his confidence fully restored as he moved to the counter. "Back to work," he snapped at the remaining staff, though there were only a few left after his earlier firings. Stephen leaned against the counter, his smirk fading slightly as he replayed the events in his head. He had won, for now, but a faint unease gnawed at him, the lingering feeling that Brianna wasn't finished. Brianna stepped out of the store, her heart pounding with anger and determination. The humiliation she had endured inside still burned, but she refused to let it consume her. She wasn't going to let Stephen Lang, or anyone like him, get away with treating her that way. She leaned against her car, taking a deep breath to steady herself. Then, she pulled out her phone and called James Carter, her business partner and close friend. "Brianna?" James answered almost immediately, his tone concerned. "What's going on? You sound tense." "I just walked out of Regal Lux," Brianna said, her voice sharp. "The manager followed me around like I was some kind of criminal, harassed me, humiliated me, and when I stood up to him, he called the cops to throw me out." James was silent for a moment, then let out a low whistle. "Unbelievable. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Brianna replied, her voice firm. "But I'm not letting this slide. Stephen Lang doesn't know it yet, but his time is up. I'm buying the store." There was a brief pause before James chuckled. "You're serious." "Dead serious," she said. "No one treats me like that and gets away with it." "You're not playing around," James said, admiration in his voice. "Do you know who owns the store?" "I'll find out," Brianna said, "and I'll make them an offer they can't refuse. By this time tomorrow, Stephen will be working for me. Or, more likely, packing his things. James laughed. You know I've got your back. Let me know what you need. I will, Brianna said, a small smile forming despite her anger. Thanks, James. Hanging up, Brianna climbed into her car. She pulled up her tablet and quickly searched for information about Regal Luxe. The store was part of a regional chain owned by an investment firm, with its headquarters just a few miles away. Perfect, Brianna murmured to herself as she started the engine. The next morning, Brianna walked into the sleek office building that housed the investment firm. She was dressed sharply, her confidence radiating as she approached the receptionist. Good morning, she said, her tone professional. I'm here to speak with someone about purchasing one of your properties. The receptionist blinked in surprise. Do you have an appointment? No, but this is a time-sensitive matter, Brianna said firmly. I'm interested in the downtown Regal Luxe location. Please let whoever is in charge know that I'm ready to make an immediate offer. The receptionist hesitated, then nodded. One moment, please. Brianna waited, her mind racing with possibilities. She wasn't just buying the store to make a point. She wanted to ensure no one else ever experienced what she had. After a few minutes, a tall man in a tailored suit approached her. He extended his hand with a polite smile. Ms. Coleman, I'm Jonathan Turner, the regional manager. I understand you're interested in one of our properties. That's correct, Brianna said, shaking his hand. Please, come with me, Turner said, leading her to a conference room. Once seated, Turner folded his hands on the table. So, you're interested in purchasing the downtown Regal Luxe location. May I ask what prompted this interest? Brianna met his gaze evenly. Let's just say the current management has made it clear that changes are necessary. I believe I'm the person to make those changes. Turner raised an eyebrow, intrigued. That's quite the claim. Acquisitions typically require significant time and review. Are you prepared for that process? I'm prepared to expedite it, Brianna said. Whatever the asking price is, I'm ready to meet it today. I'll wire the funds within hours. Turner leaned back, studying her. You're serious. Very, Brianna replied. Turner nodded slowly. All right, I'll need to consult with our team, but if you're ready to move quickly, we can arrange for the paperwork to be signed by tomorrow. That works for me, Brianna said, her voice steady. I'll be in touch later today to confirm the details, Turner said, standing and extending his hand. It's not every day someone walks in ready to buy a store outright. I look forward to finalizing this. Likewise, Brianna said, shaking his hand firmly. As Brianna left the office, her determination only grew stronger. She spent the rest of the day making arrangements, ensuring that everything would be in place for the purchase. By the time she went to bed that night, she felt a sense of calm. Stephen Lang had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Regal Luxe opened as usual. Stephen Lang stood near the counter, scanning the room with a critical eye. Though the events of the previous day lingered in his mind, he had brushed them off as a minor annoyance. To him, Brianna was just another troublemaker, someone who thought they could challenge his authority, but ultimately learned their place. The store was quiet, with only a few customers browsing, when the glass doors opened. Stephen turned instinctively to greet the new arrival, but his confident smile faltered when he saw who it was. Brianna Coleman strode into the store, her posture radiating authority. Dressed in a sleek black blazer and tailored pants, she exuded a different energy than the day before. This wasn't the same woman Stephen had thrown out. This was someone in control. Stephen's expression hardened as he approached her. You again? He said, his voice low but hostile. I thought I made it clear you're not welcome here. Brianna stopped in the center of the store, her gaze sweeping the room. She ignored Stephen's comment, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Finally, she turned to him, her voice calm and deliberate. I believe you're mistaken, Stephen, she said. I have every right to be here. Stephen scoffed, glancing at the few customers who were now watching the exchange with interest. This is private property, and I'm the manager. I decide who stays and who doesn't. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security. Again. Brianna raised an eyebrow. Call whoever you like. It won't make a difference. Stephen's frustration bubbled to the surface. You think you can just waltz in here after the scene you caused yesterday? What are you trying to prove? At that moment, the doors opened again, and Jonathan Turner, the regional manager, walked in. He was flanked by two staff members carrying briefcases. The sight of them caused Stephen to falter, confusion flashing across his face. "Mr. Turner?" Stephen said, his tone uncertain. "What are you doing here?" Turner didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked past Stephen and extended a hand to Brianna. "Ms. Coleman," he said warmly, "everything is finalized. Congratulations." "Thank you," Brianna replied, shaking his hand firmly. Stephen stared at them, his mind racing to catch up. What's going on here?" he stammered. Turner turned to Stephen, his expression unreadable. "Stephen, allow me to introduce Ms. Brianna Coleman. As of this morning, she is the new owner of Regal Lux." The words hit Stephen like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The few customers in the store exchanged surprised glances, whispering among themselves. Brianna stepped closer, her gaze fixed on Stephen. "You were so eager to make me leave yesterday," she said, her tone sharp. "But now, you work for me. Or, rather, you did." Stephen's face turned red, a mix of shock and anger rising in him. "You can't do this," he sputtered. "I've been with this store for years. I built this place." "You built a culture of exclusion and discrimination," Brianna shot back. "That's not what this store, or any business I own, stands for." Stephen's hands clenched into fists. "This is absurd. You think you can just waltz in here and take over?" "I don't think," Brianna said, her voice icy. "I know. As of today, you're no longer employed here. Consider this your official notice of termination." Stephen's jaw dropped. "You're firing me?" "Yes," Brianna said simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Stephen looked around, his eyes darting from the staff to the customers, as if searching for someone to come to his defense. No one did. Turner cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Stephen, I suggest you collect your belongings and leave peacefully. This doesn't have to be any more unpleasant than it already is." Stephen's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this," he spat at Brianna. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Brianna said calmly. "I'm making sure this store becomes a place where everyone is treated with respect." Stephen glared at her for a moment longer, then turned sharply and stormed toward the back office. The sound of a door slamming echoed through the store, punctuating his exit. Brianna turned to Turner. "Thank you for your assistance," she said. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some changes to implement." Turner nodded, offering her a respectful smile before leaving with his team. As the store returned to its usual rhythm, Brianna walked to the counter, addressing the remaining staff. "If anyone here shares Stephen's views, now is the time to speak up. Otherwise, let's get to work rebuilding this store's reputation." The staff exchanged nervous glances but said nothing, their silence signaling agreement. Brianna allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The first step was complete. The store settled into an uneasy calm after Stephen's dramatic departure. Brianna stood at the counter, watching the remaining staff as they worked, their movements tentative. The air still felt heavy with tension, but Brianna was determined to change that. Starting now, she turned to the assistant manager, a young woman with wide eyes and a nervous stance. "What's your name?" Brianna asked gently. "Lena," the woman replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Lena, I'll need your help identifying areas where we can make immediate improvements. But first, I have some calls to make," Brianna said. Lena nodded quickly, looking relieved to be given direction. Brianna pulled out her phone and stepped aside, dialing the first number on her mental list. "Daniel." The phone rang twice before he answered, his voice wary. "Hello? Daniel, it's Brianna Coleman," she said. There was a pause. "Ms. Coleman, I didn't expect to hear from you. Is everything okay?" "More than okay," Brianna replied, a smile tugging at her lips. "I'm calling to let you know I've purchased Regal Lux. As of this morning, I'm the new owner." "Wait, what?" Daniel sounded stunned. "And I'd like you to come back to work," Brianna continued. "Your integrity yesterday didn't go unnoticed, and I want you to be part of the team as we move forward." Daniel's voice cracked slightly as he responded. I don't know what to say. Thank you. I'd love to come back. Good, Brianna said. Come by this afternoon so we can discuss your role and any changes you'd like to see. We're going to make this store a better place for everyone. I'll be there, Daniel said, his tone filled with gratitude. Brianna ended the call and immediately dialed the next number. The security guard. Hello? Hi. This is Brianna Coleman, she said. I believe we met yesterday at Regal Lux. There was a cautious pause. Yes, I remember. How can I help you? I'm the new owner of the store, Brianna said, her voice steady. And I'd like to offer you your job back. What happened yesterday shouldn't have cost you your position, and I want to make things right. The guard let out a low whistle. Well, that's not what I expected to hear today. Thank you, Ms. Coleman. I'd be happy to come back. Great, Brianna said. Come by later today, and we'll go over everything. After ending the call, she returned to Lena, who was watching her with a mix of awe and curiosity. I've just rehired 2 people who should never have been let go in the first place, Brianna explained. Now, let's talk about what else needs fixing around here. Lena hesitated, then nodded. Honestly, the culture here has been tense for a while. Stephen ran the place like a dictator. People were afraid to speak up, especially when they saw how he treated certain customers. Not anymore, Brianna said firmly. From now on, this store will be a place where both customers and employees feel respected. If you see behavior that doesn't align with that, I want you to tell me immediately. Lena nodded again, her confidence growing. Understood. And thank you for doing this. It's just the beginning, Brianna said with a small smile. Later that afternoon, Daniel and the security guard arrived at the store. Brianna greeted them warmly, ushering them into a small meeting area in the back. I'm glad you both could come, she said as they sat down. It's good to be back, Daniel said, his tone earnest. I didn't think I'd ever set foot in here again after yesterday. I'm glad you are, Brianna replied. Your actions yesterday showed me the kind of integrity and courage I want on this team. Moving forward, I want this store to be a place where everyone, customers and staff alike, feels valued. That starts with people like you. The security guard nodded, his expression thoughtful. I'll admit, I didn't handle yesterday the way I wanted to, but I appreciate the chance to make things right. We all make mistakes, Brianna said. What matters is how we move forward, and together, I think we can create something better here. The 3 of them discussed changes they wanted to see in the store's culture, from better training for staff to clear policies on customer interactions. Brianna took notes, ensuring their voices were heard. As the meeting wrapped up, Daniel stood, a hint of a smile on his face. Thank you, Ms. Coleman, for everything. Call me Brianna, she said, smiling back. And thank you for standing up when it mattered. As the day wound down, Brianna stood at the front of the store, watching as customers browsed. The atmosphere already felt lighter, more welcoming. She knew there was still work to do, but for the first time since yesterday, she felt a sense of peace. She had reclaimed her dignity, but more importantly, she was creating a space where everyone could feel it too. The atmosphere in Regal Lux buzzed with purpose under Brianna's leadership, but cracks of sabotage began to surface, growing wider with each passing day. What started as minor discrepancies in inventory soon escalated to canceled orders, misplaced merchandise, and equipment failures that seemed too deliberate to be coincidence. Brianna initially suspected lingering inefficiencies from Stephen Lang's management, but the incidents became too coordinated to ignore. Her suspicions sharpened into certainty. Stephen wasn't done. One morning, Lena knocked on Brianna's office door, entering with a stack of reports. Her expression was tense. Brianna, I think we have a serious problem, she began, placing the papers on the desk. Brianna gestured for her to sit, flipping through the pages. What am I looking at? These are records of the issues we've been having. Cancelled orders, inventory mismatches, system glitches. I traced the source of the cancellations, and it's coming from an external login. When I checked further, Lena paused, her voice lowering. It's Stephen's credentials. He's been accessing the system remotely. Brianna's eyes narrowed as she processed the information. Are you saying Steven still has access to our system? Yes, Lena confirmed. I'm sorry. I thought his credentials had been revoked after he was fired, but apparently they weren't. Brianna's jaw tightened. We'll lock him out immediately. Change every password and access code. Make sure his access is completely revoked by the end of the day. Lena nodded quickly. There's more. I noticed an unusually high number of equipment failures in the store recently, so I reviewed some security footage. Look at this. She handed over a tablet, and Brianna watched as a hooded figure entered the store after hours through the staff entrance. The person moved with precision, avoiding cameras in key areas, but not all of them. In one clip, the hood slipped slightly, revealing a glimpse of the man's face. Steven Lang. Brianna's stomach churned, but she kept her voice calm. He's breaking into the store. There's something else, Lena added, rewinding to a specific frame. The video showed Steven crouching near one of the shelves, placing a small device underneath. What is that? Brianna asked. It looks like a hidden camera, Lena said. He's not just sabotaging the store. He's spying on us. Brianna set the tablet down with a sharp exhale. This isn't just pettiness. This is deliberate, calculated sabotage. He's trying to dismantle everything we've built. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. We need to catch him in the act. That evening, Brianna called a meeting with her core team, Mark, Daniel, and Lena, to lay out a plan. Steven Lang has been tampering with the store, she said bluntly. He's breaking in after hours, stealing inventory, and planting surveillance equipment. He's doing everything he can to sabotage us, and it ends tonight. Mark, the security guard, straightened in his chair. What do you need from me? Monitor the live feed from every camera. If you see him, alert me immediately, Brianna replied. Lena, double-check all system security and ensure Steven has no remaining access, she continued. And Daniel, I need you to help set up additional cameras in blind spots. We'll make sure there's no escape for him this time. Daniel nodded firmly. Got it. I also want inventory secured and logged, Brianna said, her tone decisive. No more opportunities for him to manipulate our stock. The team set to work, their determination reflecting Brianna's resolve. As the hours ticked by, the store transformed into a fortress of vigilance. By midnight, Brianna and Mark were stationed in the security room, the glow of monitors illuminating their focused faces. The live feed displayed every corner of the store, each frame scrutinized for movement. You think he'll show? Mark asked, his voice low. He will, Brianna replied, her tone steady. Steven's too arrogant to stop now. He thinks he's untouchable. An hour passed in silence. Then another. Just as Brianna began to wonder if Steven had caught wind of their plan, a faint creak came from one of the feeds. Mark leaned forward, squinting at the screen. There, he said, pointing to the staff entrance. Steven Lang slipped inside, his movements swift and deliberate. He wore a hoodie pulled low over his face, but his familiarity with the store was unmistakable. Here we go, Brianna murmured, her eyes narrowing. Steven moved toward the jewelry display cases, pulling out a small toolkit. He knelt, expertly disabling the locks, before transferring several pieces into a bag. From the feed, Brianna could see the faintest hint of a smirk on his face, as though he believed he was untouchable. Mark reached for his radio. Should I call the police now? Not yet, Brianna said, her voice calm but icy. Let him finish. I want him to have no excuses when this goes down. They watched as Steven continued, methodically working his way through the high-value displays. He retrieved the hidden camera he'd planted days earlier, inspecting it before slipping it into his pocket. He's brazen, Mark muttered. Arrogance blinds him, Brianna replied, but not us. As Steven moved toward the back exit, Brianna stood, her resolve hardening. Now, she said, call the police. Mark nodded, speaking into his radio as Brianna kept her eyes locked on the monitor, watching as Steven unwittingly walked into the final stages of his undoing. The shrill wail of sirens sliced through the silence of the night, their sound growing louder as they neared Regal Lux. Steven Lang hunched near the staff exit with a bag of stolen merchandise in hand, froze at the noise. His head snapped toward the door as the flashing red and blue lights reflected off the polished floors. The glass doors swung open, and two officers stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the dimly lit store. Stephen's eyes widened in panic as they approached, his grip tightening on the bag as though clutching it might somehow protect him. "Stephen Lang," one officer called out, his voice firm and commanding. "Put the bag down, and your hands where we can see them." Stephen's face contorted with confusion and indignation, masking the fear rising in his chest. "What is this? What are you doing here?" Behind the officers, Brianna stepped into view, her heels clicking sharply against the tile as she approached. Her expression was calm, but her eyes burned with a quiet intensity. "Good evening, Stephen," she said, her voice steady. "Didn't think we'd catch you in the act, did you?" Stephen's gaze darted between Brianna and the officers, his mind racing. "This is a setup," he barked, dropping the bag as he raised his hands defensively. "She's trying to ruin me!" One of the officers motioned for Stephen to step away from the bag. "Sir, you've been caught trespassing and stealing property. Let's keep this simple." "This isn't what it looks like," Stephen protested, his voice rising. "She's out to get me because I stood up to her. She fired me unjustly, and now she's framing me." Brianna let out a sharp laugh, the sound cutting through his rant. "Framing you? Are you seriously trying to play the victim right now? Stephen, you were literally caught on camera sneaking into the store, stealing merchandise, and planting surveillance devices. Shall I play the footage for them?" Stephen's face darkened, his veneer of confidence cracking. "I wasn't stealing," he spat. "I was—" "What, Stephen?" Brianna interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "What were you doing? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot like theft. And isn't it ironic? You accused me of stealing just because I walked into this store. You followed me, humiliated me, and called the police over nothing. And now, here you are. The real thief." The words hit Stephen like a blow. He opened his mouth to respond, but faltered, his eyes darting around the room in search of an escape. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. "I built this store. I gave it everything, and you waltz in here and destroy everything I worked for." Brianna stepped closer, her gaze locked on his. "Destroy? No, Stephen. I'm rebuilding what you poisoned. You didn't build this store. You tore it down with your bigotry, your arrogance, and your toxic leadership. And now you're reaping what you've sown." Stephen lunged forward, his face twisted with fury. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? This place wouldn't last a day without me." The officers quickly stepped in, restraining him as he thrashed against their hold. "Calm down, sir," one of them said, pulling Stephen's hands behind his back. Stephen glared at Brianna, his voice dripping with venom. "This isn't over. You're just a fraud who bought her way into something she doesn't understand." Brianna tilted her head, her expression unflinching. "You're right about one thing, Stephen. It isn't over. Because now, you're going to face the consequences of your actions. You thought you could sabotage me, but all you've done is expose yourself for what you really are." The officers secured the handcuffs, reading Stephen his rights as they led him toward the exit. His shouts echoed through the store, but Brianna remained still, her expression unreadable. As the officers reached the door, Stephen turned one last time, his face a mix of desperation and rage. "You'll regret this," he shouted. "This isn't justice. It's revenge." Brianna took a step forward, her voice calm but cutting. "No, Stephen, this is accountability. And if you had even a shred of integrity, you'd understand the difference." The officers led him outside, the glass doors closing behind them with a soft chime. The store fell silent, the weight of the confrontation settling over the space. Mark stepped up beside Brianna, his voice low. "That was something." "It was necessary," Brianna replied, her tone resolute. Stephen needed to be stopped. People like him think they're untouchable because no one holds them accountable. Not anymore. Mark nodded, his respect for her clear. "I'll review the footage again and make sure it's ready for the police report." "Thank you, Mark," Brianna said, offering him a small smile. "You've been incredible through all of this," Mark shrugged. "Just doing my job. But honestly, it's nice working for someone who actually stands up for what's right." Brianna glanced at the now quiet store, her determination renewed. "We're not just standing up for what's right. We're building something better." The next morning, the sun poured through the tall windows of Regal Lux, casting a warm glow over the pristine displays. The store felt different now. Lighter, freer. News of Stephen Lang's arrest had already begun to circulate, and while some customers expressed surprise, most seemed relieved. The staff moved with a sense of purpose, their confidence bolstered by Brianna's leadership. Brianna stood near the entrance, greeting customers as they entered. Her presence radiated authority, but her smile was warm, welcoming. She wanted people to know that Regal Lux was no longer a place where judgment and exclusion thrived. "Miss Coleman," Lena said as she approached, holding a clipboard, "we've tallied the inventory and completed the restock. Everything is accounted for, thanks to Mark's extra security measures." "Good work," Brianna replied, scanning the store with satisfaction. "How's the team holding up?" "Better than I expected," Lena admitted. "Yesterday was intense, but I think everyone's feeling optimistic now. They're glad Stephen's gone." "We all are," Brianna nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It's not just about Stephen being gone. It's about creating an environment where no one like him can thrive again. That's the real challenge." Lena smiled. "If anyone can make it happen, it's you." As the day progressed, Brianna called a staff meeting. The employees gathered in the office, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Daniel and Mark stood at the back, their presence a quiet but steady source of support. Brianna addressed the group, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "I want to start by thanking all of you. The past few days haven't been easy, but you've handled everything with resilience and professionalism. That's what this store will be known for. Not the mistakes of the past, but the integrity we're building together." A ripple of agreement moved through the room, some employees nodding while others smiled. "Stephen Lang's actions don't define Regal Lux," Brianna continued, "and they don't define any of you. This store is more than just a place to shop. It's a reflection of the people who make it what it is. And I'm proud to lead a team that's committed to respect, excellence, and fairness." Daniel raised his hand hesitantly. "Ms. Coleman, can I say something?" "Of course," Brianna said, gesturing for him to speak. Daniel stood, clearing his throat. "I just want to say thank you for everything. Yesterday, you stood up for this store and for us. Stephen made a lot of people feel small, but you showed us that we don't have to stay silent when something's wrong. That means a lot." The room filled with quiet applause, the staff's appreciation evident. Brianna nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Daniel. And let me say this. If you ever see something wrong, speak up. This isn't just my store. It's ours." Later that afternoon, Brianna met with Mark in the security office to review the footage from the previous night. Together, they compiled everything into a detailed report for the police. "You've got a strong case against him," Mark said, clicking through the video files. "With this footage, there's no way he can weasel out of it." "Good," Brianna replied. "It's not just about justice for what he did to me. It's about making sure he can't do this to anyone else." Mark leaned back in his chair, giving her a thoughtful look. "You know, not a lot of people would have gone to these lengths. Most would have just moved on." Brianna met his gaze, her expression resolute. "Moving on isn't enough when people like Stephen think they can get away with anything. Someone has to take a stand." Mark smiled faintly. "Well, you did, and it made all the difference." As the day wound down, Brianna stepped outside to take a moment for herself. The sun was beginning to set, casting the street in shades of gold and orange. She leaned against the storefront, her thoughts drifting to the journey that had brought her here. A week ago, she had walked into Regal Lux as a customer, only to be humiliated and dismissed by someone who saw her as less than. Today, she stood at its helm, transforming it into a space where everyone was welcome, regardless of how they looked or where they came from. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from James Carter. "James, saw the news. Stephen arrested? You don't mess around." Brianna smiled, typing a quick response. "Brianna, no one should mess with what's right. I told you I'd fix it." As she slipped her phone back into her pocket, a customer approached the door. Pausing to read the new signage, Brianna had added, "Regal Luxe, where everyone belongs." The customer glanced at Brianna, smiling. "I like that message. It's refreshing." "Thank you," Brianna said warmly. "We mean it." The customer stepped inside, and Brianna followed, her heels clicking softly against the tile. As the door closed behind her, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Not just for what she had done, but for what she was building. Regal Luxe wasn't just a store anymore. It was a statement. And Brianna Coleman intended to make sure it stayed that way. The weeks following Stephen Lang's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and media attention. News of the incident spread quickly, and local outlets picked up the story, framing it as a stark example of accountability triumphing over prejudice. For Stephen, the spotlight was unwelcome. For Brianna, it was an opportunity to underscore the values she was building at Regal Luxe. Brianna worked closely with her legal team, ensuring every piece of evidence against Stephen was meticulously documented. The footage from the night of his arrest, the records of canceled orders and tampered inventory, and the recovered hidden camera formed an airtight case. Each detail painted a clear picture of Stephen's calculated sabotage. One afternoon, Brianna sat in her office with her lawyer, Ethan Hayes, as they reviewed the final submission for the court. "Stephen doesn't stand a chance," Ethan said, tapping a stack of papers. "With the video evidence alone, the jury will see exactly what he was up to. The rest just solidifies the intent." Brianna nodded, her expression calm but firm. "Good. This isn't just about what he did to me. It's about making sure he's held accountable for all of it." Ethan gave her a small smile. "You're doing more than that. This case sets a precedent. It shows people like Stephen that they can't get away with this kind of behavior." Brianna leaned back, her determination unwavering. "That's the goal." When the trial began, Stephen's demeanor was a stark contrast to his bravado on the night of his arrest. He appeared disheveled, his confidence replaced by thinly veiled desperation. His lawyer attempted to frame his actions as a momentary lapse in judgment, driven by the emotional turmoil of losing his job. Brianna's legal team countered with precision. The footage was presented to the court, showing Stephen entering the store after hours, disabling locks, stealing merchandise, and retrieving the hidden camera. The timeline of events, coupled with the records of his unauthorized access to the store's system, painted an irrefutable picture of premeditated sabotage. During cross-examination, Stephen faltered. His claims that he had acted out of desperation and grief for losing his job fell apart under scrutiny. When confronted with the footage of his actions, his attempts to explain them away only deepened the court's suspicion of his motives. Brianna sat in the courtroom, calm but unyielding, as Stephen avoided her gaze. She didn't relish his downfall, but she felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that justice was being served. Not just for her, but for everyone he had wronged during his tenure at the store. The verdict was swift. Stephen was found guilty of theft, trespassing, and criminal mischief. The judge's sentencing reflected the severity of his actions, including fines, community service, and a probation period. The courtroom was silent as the decision was read, Stephen's shoulders slumping under the weight of his defeat. As the trial concluded, reporters gathered outside the courthouse, eager for a statement from Brianna. Standing tall, she faced the cameras, her voice steady and clear. "This case was never about revenge," she said. "It was about accountability. Stephen Lang's actions were not just an attack on me, but on the values of fairness and integrity that should define every workplace. Today's verdict is a reminder that no one is above the consequences of their actions, and that dignity and respect will always prevail." The reporters pressed her with more questions, but Brianna declined further comment, walking past the crowd with her head held high. Back at Regal Luxe, the atmosphere was celebratory but grounded. The The staff had followed the trial closely, and the outcome felt like a collective victory. Brianna gathered her team in the office once more, her tone both reflective and inspiring. "What happened with Stephen could have torn us apart," she said. "But instead, it brought us closer. We've proven that this store isn't just about products, it's about people. And as long as we remember that, there's nothing we can't overcome." The team erupted into applause, their confidence in her leadership unshaken. Later that evening, Brianna stepped outside the store, taking a moment to breathe in the crisp night air. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the challenges she had faced, and the triumphs she had earned. Stephen Lang had tried to tear her down, but instead, he had strengthened her resolve and reinforced her mission. With a small smile, she turned back toward the store, the lights glowing warmly from within. Regal Lux was more than a store now. It was a beacon of what was possible when justice and integrity guided every step forward.